Hi, so I'm having a lot of trouble with my recordings when I use Screencastify. They are kicking me out in the middle of my recordings. I think it's because I have done so many recordings. So I'm going to stick with what I have. When we started, we were reading this problem. I had just finished reading it, and we ended right there where it said, how many yards did they carry the canoe? And the equation 40 equals 2/11 can be used to find the distance, d, in yards that they carried the canoe. So our first job is to isolate this variable d, the distance, okay? So in order to do that, we want to get rid of our denominator here in this fraction, which is 11. So here, this is like dividing by 11. So the opposite or inverse operation of dividing by 11 is to multiply both sides by 11. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you also have to do the other to keep everything equal. So that would cancel out this part of that equation. And then this one, we would multiply 11 times 40, and we get 2d left over. And when you have 2, the coefficient 2 in front of the variable d, remember those two numbers are being multiplied. So in order to get rid of the 2, we do the inverse operation of multiplication, which is division. And we get 220 is the distance. And I have to look back in my problem. It says how many yards. So this is 220 yards is the distance they traveled. So really, if you're just using all the information from the chapter that you've learned so far about isolating your variable and getting it by itself, this should be a pretty good lesson for you. So let's do a few more, making sure we focus on reading the questions and then solving the problem. So let's start with these. Okay. Stu is 4 feet tall. This height represents 6/7 of his brother's height. 6/7 of his brother's height equals 4 feet tall. This equation, the equation 4/6h equals 4, can be used to find the height in feet of Stu's brother. How tall is Stu's brother? All right, so first thing is we just find the equation that is embedded inside of that story problem, and we write it down. And I can't remember because I've tried this video 3 times now if I've already told you, but you must write it down. The days of just doing all of the math in your head are over at this point. There is too much computation and steps involved to do math without writing your math down. So write down your equation first, and your second step is to figure out where your variable is and isolate it, get it all by itself. And then your second step is to try to get rid of the fractions by multiplying by the denominators. So here we have a 7. This is 6 divided by 7, 6h divided by 7. And so we are going to do the inverse operation, which is to multiply both sides by 7. And on this side, that will cancel those 2 out. We're left with just 6h. And then on this side, 4 times 7 is 28. All right, our next step again is to look for the variable and get it by itself. And we have just a 6. The coefficient 6 is being multiplied times the h. So the opposite or inverse operation of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 6. And we are left, on this side, these two cancel. We're left with h equals 6 goes into 28 4 times. So that 6 times 4 is 24. I'm left with 4/6. But if you look at that, if you remember from previous chapters, you always have to simplify your fraction. So here I can divide both of those by 2 and they'll be even. So I'll get 4 2/3. Now, these are story problems. So it's not just h equals 4 2/3. We need to know what are we dealing with. And here we're dealing with feet. So it's 4 2/3 of a foot is the height. So you have to label it. Okay. Next. This one I would like you to do with me, okay? The last one, if you didn't do that one with me, that's okay. That was an I do. This one is a you do, or we do. So let's do this one together. You don't have to write down this problem, but just write down the equation when we find it. It says Bryce bought a bag of cashews. He served 7/8 pound of cashews at a party. This amount represents 2/3 of the entire bag. The equation 2/3 n equals 7/8 can be used to find the number of pounds n in a full bag. How many pounds of cashews were in the bag that Bryce bought? So we find our equation, first step. This equation can be used. We write the equation down, may not skip this step. And then we look for the question to make sure we're solving, we know what we're solving for. So it can be used to find the number of pounds, n, in a bag. So n is going to be equal to the number of pounds. Okay, and then we're going to isolate our variable n, get it by itself. Now you don't have to make that box around it every time. I'm just showing you what isolating. You can actually just leave it as n. In fact, I better show you that way because as you get to be better at math, you don't just circle the n or do anything to the n. You just start isolating the variable. So we're going to get rid of the 3 here on this side because the n is what we want to get by itself. So here we're dividing by 3. In order to get rid of that 3, we must multiply both sides by 3. This side cancels out and we're left with 2n. And this side, remember when you're multiplying a whole number times a fraction, you can always make your whole number into a fraction by just putting that whole number over 1. And then the rules of multiplying fractions apply. So we just have 7 times 3 is 21. 8 times 1 is 8. Okay, and I'm just going to leave it in improper fraction until we're all done. We'll see what comes next, okay? So we still want to isolate this variable. And to isolate this variable, we need to divide by 2 on both sides. So I can't just put a divide by 2 over here, so I'm going to write this one a little bit different. I'm just going to put divide by 2 over here. Okay, because now we have a fraction. You can't have a fraction that has another denominator. That's just not the proper way to write it. So we're going to use a division symbol in this case. And we're going to be using the rules of dividing fractions to solve that side of our equation. Now, if you think back, the rules of dividing by with fractions is dividing fractions as easy as pi, flip the second and multiply, or keep it, change it, flip it. And this is taking the inverse operation of this 2. So again, since we're dealing with fractions, we want to make that 2 into a fraction to make it easier to work with. So we put a 1 underneath it because it's just saying we have, like if you were talking about pies, you would have 2 whole pies and they only each have 1 piece. So they're not cut yet. Okay, so here we have keep it, change it, flip it. All right, and then we're going to multiply to get the answer here. N equals 21 over 16. And then we're going to simplify here because we have a top-heavy or improper fraction. I always think of this as an air balloon that is just too top-heavy, it's going to fall over. So, all right, so anyway, 16 goes into 21 one time. I take away that group of 16 that I made into a whole number 1. And I have 5 left over. So it will be 1 5/16 of a, look back, of a pound. All right. I think we should do one more. And I'd like you to pause your video and try this one on your own. See if you can do it. I believe you'll be able to. But try it on your own first, pause it, and then resume the video and I will go over it with you, making sure that you're doing it correctly, okay? So go ahead, read it, write down your equation, isolate your variable and solve for it, and then come back and check to see if you're understanding this properly. If you're not, you can always come see me and I'll explain it some more. All right, I'm going to read it for us. Again, even though you've just read it, in Jamie's math class, 9 students chose soccer as their favorite sport. This amount represents 3/8 of the entire class. The equation 3/8 S equals 9 can be used to find the total number of students S in Jamie's class. How many students are in Jamie's math class? So S equals the number of students. That's what my variable is going to represent. So when I label it, it's going to be S equals whatever the number is, and that's going to be that many students. Okay, my next step is I'm going to find the equation and write it down. All right, and then we're going to solve for S. So in order to do that, we want to make these into whole numbers. We want to get rid of that denominator 8. 3S is being divided by 8. So the opposite or inverse operation is to multiply there. This side will cancel and we'll be left with 3S equals 72. 9 times 8 is 72. All right, I don't have my S all by itself yet. I'm multiplying by this coefficient 3. So in order to get rid of the 3, I divide both sides by 3 using the inverse operation. These cancel, and I am left with S equals 3 fits into 7 twice with 1 left over. So 3 fits into 12 4 times. S equals 24 students. All right. Well, good luck on that. If you need help, make sure you see me, but I really feel like if you go ahead and you do each step, you're going to be able to figure these out today. So you can go ahead and try your Think Central assignment.